The dishwasher was still running when I left. It's strange what your brain clings to in a moment like that. You'd think it would be her voice, or the scent of her shampoo, or the last thing she said to me. But no, just that stupid hum of water churning in circles, like it had no idea our entire life had just been shut off. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even take my keys. But I did take the ring. Not hers. Mine. I yanked it off while standing at the elevator, hands shaking so badly I dropped it twice before I finally shoved it into my coat pocket. I never planned to disappear. I'm not that kind of person. Or at least, I didn't think I was. But something had been off for weeks. Maybe months. The kind of off you can't name, but feel in your bones. Like walking into a room where someone was just whispering about you. She stopped sleeping on her side of the bed. That's the part that broke me, more than anything else. She used to curl into me like she needed my heartbeat to fall asleep. Now, the sheets stayed cold where she used to lie. One morning I woke up and the closet smelled like aftershave. Not mine. Another morning I found a single wine glass in the sink, red lipstick on the rim. She doesn't wear lipstick. At least, not around me. And then, there was the email. She forgot to log out of her laptop. I wasn't snooping. I opened it to check the weather and saw a subject line that read, "Last night." I didn't read it. I swear to God, I didn't. I just stared at it until the screen dimmed itself to sleep. That was the night I packed. I went north. Rented a place with mold on the ceiling and a lock that barely worked. Bought cheap coffee and cheaper cigarettes, even though I don't smoke. Drew the curtains. Spoke to no one. I thought that was it. That I'd live out the rest of my life as a man who disappeared on a woman who'd already erased him from her story. Until last Thursday. I was brushing my teeth. The mirror was fogged. The same old toothbrush, the same cracked tile floor. Then, 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Familiar. I didn't move. Not at first. And then a voice, muffled, shaky. "I know you're in there. Please, just open the door." It was her. And she was crying. She brought nothing with her. No bag, no coat, not even her phone from what I could tell. Just herself. Damp hair clinging to her cheeks, face pale, and a look in her eyes that I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger. Wasn't grief. It was something worse, uncertainty. As if she didn't know why she was standing there either. I wanted to shut the door. I really did. Every part of me screamed that I had made peace with her absence, that I didn't want answers anymore. But I opened it anyway, because when you spend that many nights convincing yourself someone doesn't care, and then they show up crying on your doorstep, something in your gut betrays you. I didn't say her name. I couldn't. My mouth just wouldn't form it. Instead, I stepped back and let her walk in. She sat on the edge of my broken-down couch like it was sacred, like she didn't want to disturb the air around it. I stood by the door, still holding my toothbrush. It took me longer than I want to admit to realize I hadn't rinsed the foam from my mouth. I wiped it on my sleeve and finally asked the one question I'd been holding in since the moment I saw her. "Why now?" She flinched. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that I saw it in her fingers. They clenched the fabric of her pants so tightly her knuckles went white. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked around the room like she needed to confirm that this was where I'd really been hiding all these months. Like part of her thought I had built a new life, maybe even found someone else. I hadn't. She could see that now. I was still wearing the same pair of boots from the night I left. Still had that ugly yellow mug she hated sitting on the counter. Still a man halfway between existing and vanishing. "I found your sketchbook," she said eventually, voice hoarse. The old one. The one with the torn cover and the fox on the last page. My chest tightened. I had hidden that sketchbook under the loose floorboard of our old apartment, the one in the bedroom closet she never used. I left it behind on purpose. A time capsule, maybe, or a quiet scream she'd never hear. "I shouldn't have looked," she added quickly. "But I did." Her eyes finally met mine. "You drew me, Elliot. Over and over again, even when I thought you hated me." I didn't answer, because I didn't hate her. Not even when I found the wine glass. Not even when she stopped looking me in the eye. I hated what we had become, sure, but not her. Never her. She reached into her pocket and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper, creased and damp. She held it out with both hands like it might dissolve if she wasn't careful. "I wrote this," she whispered. "The night you left. I was going to give it to you in the morning. I thought you were just sleeping on the couch again. I didn't know you were gone. I took the paper. I didn't open it. Not yet. There was something else in the room. An energy. Not quite forgiveness. Not yet apology. But something real. Something dangerous. Because if what she said was true, then everything I thought I knew about her betrayal, the lipstick, the aftershave, the silence, might have been wrong. And if I was the one who made the mistake, what the hell happens next? I didn't read the letter that night. I held it for hours, the paper soft from her pocket, the ink bleeding slightly at the edges from the rain. But I couldn't bring myself to unfold it. I placed it face down on the small table next to the couch, and every time I looked away, I could still feel it staring at me. Morel didn't ask me to read it either. She just sat there, quiet, like she knew pushing would break whatever fragile thread kept me from asking her to leave. The silence between us wasn't heavy, it was surgical, like we were both dissecting the moment from opposite sides of the same incision. I made us tea. She liked peppermint. I only had black. She didn't complain, didn't even sip it, just held the mug like it gave her something to do with her hands. "Do you live here now?" she asked after maybe 10 minutes, her voice almost a whisper. I nodded slowly. Yeah, for now. That was all I could give her. I didn't want her imagining me building some peaceful new life, finding myself, becoming a better man. I wasn't. I was surviving. Eating cheap canned soup, taking jobs that barely paid, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. like the answers would be written in the cracks. "Did you tell anyone?" she asked, her eyes drifting toward the boarded-up window. "Where you went?" I shook my head. "Only Milo." She blinked. "Your cousin Milo?" I nodded again. "Told him not to tell anyone. Not even you." She exhaled a long, quiet breath and nodded as if that made sense. Maybe it did. Maybe she had already guessed I was somewhere out here. Not too far. Not too close. Still in reach, if she dared stretch far enough. We didn't talk much after that. She asked if she could lie down, and I let her take the bed. I didn't offer. She didn't insist. I stayed on the couch, blanket half covering me, shoes still on. And that damn letter on the table, staring. I closed my eyes. Tried to drift off. But my brain replayed everything. Not from the night I left, but from the months before that. The moments that didn't make sense. The gaps in her stories. The perfume that wasn't hers. The late nights. The tired smiles. The distance. And then I remembered something. One night, maybe 3 weeks before I left, I came home earlier than usual from a client meeting. The lights were off. I could hear music. Faint. Jazz. Something she never played when I was home. I opened the door, walked in, and she was standing in the kitchen with her back to me, humming. She didn't hear me at first. I called her name. She jumped and quickly wiped something off the counter. I thought it was just wine, but I realized now there was no glass. Just the smell of citrus cleaner and something else, bleach maybe? I asked her what she was doing, and she told me she spilled something, that she didn't want me to slip. I believed her, because I wanted to. Now I'm not so sure. Around 4 a.m., I got up, sat at the table, picked up the letter. I finally unfolded it, and what I read changed everything. The letter was written in blue ink, the cheap kind that smudges if you hold the pen too tight. Her handwriting hadn't changed, still sharp at the edges, curling just enough to seem elegant without trying. But there were pressure points in the strokes. Hesitations. As if she wrote some parts quickly, impulsively, and others like she had to force her hand to keep moving. The first line hit me like a slap. "If you're reading this, it means you left before I could stop you." I froze. For some reason, that sentence felt more intimate than 1,000 whispered "I love yous." She hadn't just known I would leave. She had felt it coming. Maybe long before I did. She wrote about the silence. The cold space between us. How she knew I had been pulling away, watching her, calculating things I never said aloud. But she also wrote something else, something that made my skin prickle. "I didn't cheat on you, Elliot. Not physically, not emotionally, but I know you think I did. And maybe that's worse. Because if I had, you'd at least have a villain to hate." I stopped reading there. For a while, my eyes scanned the corners of the page, the empty margins, like there might be invisible ink revealing the real truth. Because the lipstick? The cologne? The bracelet? What were those? Figments? False leads? Was I losing it? I forced myself to keep going. She confessed to staying out late, not with anyone, but alone. Driving around aimlessly, parking in dark lots near the waterfront, sitting with the windows down just to feel something real. She wrote that the apartment started to feel like a stranger's house. That every time she tried to touch me, I tensed. That I stopped laughing in my sleep. That I didn't look at her anymore. Not really. She said she left her email open on purpose, that she hoped I'd read it. Not the message itself, but the reply. The one she drafted and never sent. "The night I found that bracelet under our bed," she wrote. I panicked. "It wasn't mine. I thought it was yours. That you were seeing someone. That you brought her into our home." I didn't know how to ask. I couldn't bear to hear you say yes. I dropped the letter. The bracelet. She thought it was mine? I stood up too fast, knocking over the chair. My stomach twisted. My ears rang. I walked to the sink and splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't help. I had built my entire decision to disappear on a mountain of assumptions, on clues that weren't clues, on fear dressed up as certainty. And maybe I hadn't even noticed that she was afraid too. But then another thought hit me. If the bracelet didn't belong to either of us, whose was it? And why, weeks before I left, did the hallway lights in our building flicker every night at the same time, like someone had been timing their exit? And what about the man I saw at the corner coffee shop every Thursday, the one who smiled at her too easily when she thought I wasn't watching? Maybe we were both hiding, or maybe one of us was lying better than the other. Either way, the letter didn't end with a goodbye. It ended with, "If you still believe I betrayed you, ask me about the photo. The one I burned." I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with the blanket twisted around my legs, staring at the darkened ceiling, trying to breathe through the weight in my chest. The letter stayed folded on the floor where I dropped it, like a crime scene I didn't want to tape off. Her words repeated themselves in my head over and over. "Ask me about the photo. The one I burned." What photo? What could she possibly have destroyed that would explain anything? That would make this mess feel less rigged? And the worst part, the part one couldn't shake, was the fact that I hadn't ever noticed a missing photo. Nothing from our walls was gone. No empty frames. No ashes in the sink. If she burned something, she did it quietly. On purpose. And not for me to see. When the sun rose, pale and indifferent, I got up and peeked into the bedroom. She was still asleep, or pretending to be, curled into herself on the left side of the bed. My side. She always used to sleep on the right. Always. I closed the door without a sound. Boiled water. Sat down at the table. And waited. She emerged around 9. Same clothes, hair tied up, face raw. She didn't look surprised to find me sitting there. Just tired. She poured herself a cup of tea without asking, like she used to, then sat across from me like we were just two people trying to figure out who moved the furniture in their house while they were asleep. For a few minutes, we just drank. No words. Just the clink of the spoon and the occasional breath. Then I said it. I read the letter. Her eyes didn't widen. Her lips didn't tremble. She just nodded slowly and looked down at her mug. I swallowed. My throat was dry. "What photo did you burn?" That's when she finally looked up. And her eyes, they weren't guilty. Or scared. They were something else. Like she'd been waiting to be asked that for a long time. "Do you remember our neighbor?" she said, voice steady but soft. "The guy who lived across from us before the building got remodeled?" I blinked. It took a second. But then it came back. Mr. Kessler. Mid-40s. Divorced. Kept to himself. Had a weird obsession with bird feeders. He'd moved out 2 years before I left. "Yeah," I said carefully. "What about him?" She reached into her bag, the one I hadn't even noticed she brought with her, and pulled out a small metal tin. She slid it across the table. "He had a camera," she said. "One of those old film ones. He used to take pictures of everything. He gave me one once." I hesitated, then opened the tin. Inside were matchsticks. Half-burned. Some warped. Some whole. And beneath them, a single torn corner of photo paper. All that remained. The image was scorched, nearly unrecognizable, but I could make out part of a hallway. Ours. Dimly lit. And what looked like a shoe. Someone standing in the shadows. "I found the full photo the night after you left," she said, her voice lowering. "It was taped under our mailbox." I looked at her. Confused. Waiting. "It showed someone leaving our apartment," she said. "But it wasn't you." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" I whispered. She exhaled shakily. "The person in the photo had my bracelet in their hand." I stared at her. "The bracelet from under the bed?" She nodded. "And the thing is, Elliot," her voice trembled for the first time, "I never saw that bracelet before either. Until the night you found it." I leaned back in my chair, dizzy. My stomach flipped. My skin felt too tight. Nothing made sense anymore. She looked at me, eyes wide, terrified. Someone else was in our apartment, Elliot, and we didn't even know it. I don't remember standing up, but I found myself pacing the room with my fists clenched, my breath shallow, and my mind split wide open like a cracked windshield. A person had been in our apartment. Someone who left behind a bracelet. Someone who held it in the shadows of our hallway. Someone who may have known both of us well enough to move through our life without raising alarm. Morel stayed seated, but her eyes followed me like she was afraid I'd walk out again. This time without hesitation, without a toothbrush, without a goodbye. I burned the photo because it scared me, she said, her voice quieter than before, like she was sharing a secret with the room more than with me. I didn't want it. I didn't want it to be real. I thought maybe I had imagined the whole thing until I saw the bracelet again. The same one, in your hand, under our bed. I never wore it. I swear. I turned to her slowly. Why didn't you tell me this before? She looked down at her lap. Because I didn't trust myself. I didn't know what was real. You were already pulling away. I thought if I told you someone else had been inside our home, you'd think I'd lost my mind. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Because part of me had thought that. Back then, I'd already convinced myself she was slipping away. I was just trying to figure out who she was slipping to. But what if there was never another man? What if the real betrayal was neither of ours? A memory snapped into focus, sharp and unwelcome. One night, about a month before I left, I came home from a late grocery run. I remember struggling with the bags, swearing under my breath because one handle snapped. I kicked the door closed behind me and called her name. She wasn't there, but the bathroom light was on. Not the overhead, the one above the mirror. That wasn't strange. What was strange was the window. It was open. She never opened that window. It stuck. Always had. And it looked out over a flat stretch of roof that led to the fire escape. I asked her about it when she came back later. She said she left it open for air. I believed her. I wanted to. Now I felt sick. I stopped pacing and sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. Do you think someone was watching us? I asked, the words heavy and unreal. Coming in while we were out? Or asleep? Morel didn't speak for a moment. Then she nodded. Just once. I started keeping the bedroom door locked, she whispered. Not to keep you out, but to keep something else from getting in. I stared at her. How long has this been going on? I don't know, she admitted. But it stopped after you left. Or maybe I just stopped noticing. That word again. Noticing. As if everything only existed if we were brave enough to see it. Suddenly, I needed to know more. I pulled out my old laptop, powered it on. It whirred and groaned like it hadn't been touched in years. I opened the cloud drive I used to back up the old apartment's hallway cam. We had set it up after a package got stolen. I hadn't checked it in months before leaving. I thought it was just for show. I skipped through days of uneventful thumbnails. Nothing. 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 And then, a blur. A motion capture on the night before I left. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, black and white. Timestamp 2:38 a.m. I watched as myself walked out of the apartment, bag slung over my shoulder, head down. I paused it. That was the moment I left. The moment I thought was the end. But then, 10 minutes later, another figure. Entering. Not Morel. Not me. Hooded. Gloved. Small frame. No face visible. They entered our apartment. No key. Just slipped in like they belonged. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry, my heart pounding in my ears. And Morel, she was trembling now. That night, she whispered, I thought I heard footsteps after you left. I thought it was just guilt. I looked at her. It wasn't guilt, I said. It was them. We didn't speak for a long time after watching the video. Morel sat curled up in the corner of the couch, legs tucked underneath her, eyes fixed on the floor. I stayed at the table, laptop open in front of me, frozen on the still image of the figure slipping inside our home. There was something profoundly violating about it. Not just the fact that a stranger had entered, but how effortless it looked. As if they'd done it before. As if they knew the layout, the timing, the silence. I kept rewinding the footage, frame by frame, trying to catch something, anything, that would give them away. A limp, a reflection, a glimpse of skin. Nothing. Just that hood, those gloves, and a practiced familiarity that made my skin crawl. I think it started before the bracelet, Morel said finally, her voice hollow. Months earlier. I just didn't recognize the signs. She pulled her sweater tighter around herself and stared blankly at the window. Things would move. Not big things. Just my perfume bottle not where I left it. A drawer I swore I closed, opened the next morning. Light bulbs that went out, then suddenly worked again. I thought I was being forgetful, stressed. You were so distant by then, and I didn't want to add to the weight. She paused, biting the edge of her thumbnail, something she hadn't done since college. But the worst was the night I found my phone recording. I turned to her sharply. What do you mean, recording? She nodded slowly. I woke up one night to go to the bathroom. When I came back, my phone screen was on. The camera app was open. Recording. I hadn't touched it. I never used the camera at night. But it had been running for 23 minutes. I felt something shift in my gut. What was in the video? Nothing, she whispered. Just darkness. The ceiling. The edge of the bed. My shoulder. But it was the angle that scared me. It was resting on the dresser, too far to have fallen there on its own. And it was tilted toward us, like someone had placed it there. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but I needed to move. I crossed the room and pulled open the drawer where I kept my old hard drives. I dug through cords and adapters until I found the backup drive I hadn't touched since we moved out. Plugged it in. My hands were shaking now, too. I opened the oldest folders, labeled with dates, timestamps, boring things. I went to the ones from winter. One file caught my eye. It was a scan of a handwritten note. Not mine. Not hers. It had been saved accidentally when I copied a batch of receipts. The handwriting was cramped, left-leaning. The note said, "You're not supposed to be awake when I come." I dropped the mouse. My heart seized in my chest. Morel stood up behind me. What is it? I didn't speak. I just pointed. She leaned in. Her face went pale. She took a shaky breath, then opened her mouth to speak, but froze. Her eyes widened. Wait, go back, she whispered. To what? That handwriting. I've seen it before. I blinked. Where? She didn't answer. She ran to her bag, pulled out a small black journal I hadn't seen before, flipped through it frantically, then stopped, held it out. Page after page, anonymous notes she'd found tucked under our doormat, folded into her coat pocket at the gym, once even slipped into her glove compartment. All of them short, all of them strange, and all of them in the same writing. I like the way your hair smells today. He doesn't see what I see. You're not alone at night. My throat tightened. How long have you had these? I asked. Almost a year. Her voice cracked. I thought it was just someone being creepy. I didn't want to scare you. You didn't want to scare me? I snapped, louder than I meant to. Someone was stalking you. In our apartment. Leaving messages. Recording us. And you didn't tell me? She stepped back, face folding into guilt. Because I thought you were already leaving me, she said. I didn't want to give you another reason to run. But I had already run. And now I realized I hadn't just run from her. I had run from something else entirely. We were never alone in that apartment. Someone had been watching us both, waiting, and they had never been caught. We didn't call the police. Maybe we should have. Maybe that would have made it all more official, more real. Filed a report, printed the evidence, scrubbed our fingerprints off the past. But neither of us had the energy to retell our story to someone who'd chalk it all up to paranoia and domestic miscommunication. That's what people like us fear the most. Not that we won't be believed, but that we'll be half believed. Enough to be heard, never enough to be helped. Instead, we made a different decision. We packed up the cabin that day, quietly, together. She folded my shirts like she used to. I taped the boxes. She found my old sketches. I found her favorite books still pressed with the tiny dried flowers she picked during our anniversary picnic 3 years ago. We said very little, but something passed between us every time our eyes met. Something I hadn't seen in years. Not just the memory of love, but the beginning of trust. A fragile thread. But threads are how all things begin again. Before we left, I went back to the camera footage. I downloaded everything, every frame, every timestamp, every blurred image of that hooded figure, and copied it onto 2 flash drives. One for me, one for her. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need justice. But I needed to remember that it wasn't just in my head. That we were right to be afraid, and stronger for surviving it. We didn't go back to our old apartment. The landlord had already renovated it into something cold and stainless steel. A startup founder lived there now. Young, loud, always ordering food at midnight. He wouldn't hear the creaks in the walls the way we did. He wouldn't notice when something went missing, not until it was too late. But that wasn't our problem anymore. We were done being haunted. We drove west. No plan, just the road and the sky and the way her hand found mine at red lights. We stopped in small towns, ate breakfast in quiet diners with coffee-stained menus, and watched each other. Really watched each other. Not the way people stare when they're suspicious, the way they look when they're remembering why they stayed so long in the first place. One night, we found a cottage for rent just outside a town called Hayworth, population barely 1,000. No one knew us there. No one cared. The neighbors were kind, quiet. The woods behind the house stretched for miles, and there were no fire escapes, no flickering hallway lights, no drafty windows that could swing open in the dark. We started over. She began painting again. I opened a small studio downtown, offering portraits and murals. Kids stopped by after school to sketch with me. Morel taught a community class on wildlife journaling. She finally wrote her book about urban foxes. We laughed about that. Full circle. We didn't talk about the letters, or the photo, or the shadow that slipped into our home all those months ago. Not often. But sometimes, when the wind knocked a shutter loose or a light flickered unexpectedly, we'd just look at each other. And that look was enough to say, we know what it's like to lose everything in silence. And we're never going to let that happen again. I don't think we ever fully understood who that person was, or why they chose us. Maybe they were just a thief, a voyeur, a broken person playing with the edges of our life. But they didn't win. Because in the end, I didn't lose her. And she didn't lose me. The fear that almost tore us apart gave us a second chance. And this time, we didn't leave anything unsaid.